Hi, I'm Owen from Rask Australia. Thanks for tuning in to the Rask Network. Before we get into today's show, there are a few things we have to go over. Firstly, what you're about to hear and see is limited to general information only. It's not personal financial advice like you'd get from a financial planner. Also, it's important to remember that past performance is not indicative of future performance. That means that anything that's happened in the past, or we say today, is not necessarily going to reflect what happens in the future. Lastly, please consider that any of the guests or myself are featuring on this program may have a financial interest in some of the products or shares mentioned. That's enough from me. I hope you enjoyed today's program. Joe, thanks for taking some time to join me on the first ever proper episode of the Australian Business Podcast.
Great, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the business you built. We're going to get your feedback on what it takes to run a successful cafe, being on the other side of the table where you're supplying cafes with coffee beans. If you were just tuning into this, I would highly, highly encourage you to check out the video that we just recorded with Joe, where he takes us through the business from the front door, literally. We go into the espresso bar, back into the cool room, past the roastery, and back to packaging. It'll explain everything. But mate, to keep this segment concise, what I'm hoping you can bring to the table is basically your best ideas for people that are thinking of going into hospitality, in particular cafe owners. A lot of these things, I see them, they pop up, and then a lot of them close.
There's a lot of cafes out there. It's a really accessible industry for lots of people who get into it, get passionate about it. The barrier to entry is quite low, so you can like, okay, cool, I'll open up a cafe.
Yep.
But then they have no idea about how to run a business. So the first thing I recommend is check out your course that you guys have done, because that covers all of these things, which took me years to get my head around. And then, you just want to, for me, it's the hard thing with cafe owners is getting them to think about it as a business. Like it's not, and it took me a long time. It took me to maybe sell my first business to realize that like, it's like, it's not me. It's not like if it succeeds or fails is not a reflection. It is, partially due to me, but like it's something else. It's its own entity. And ideally it needs to succeed by itself. So you need to make sure it functions, which means it has to be profitable, like all these sorts of things. You doing 60, 70 hours and not paying yourself, but the business is doing well. It's not doing well. Your free labor is what's propping it up. If you had to pay somebody to do that, and if you couldn't afford to, it would not succeed. It needs to be its own entity. And that's easier said than done.
So we talked about, we're filming in an espresso bar. If you're just listening to this in audio form, we've got the roastery behind you. In a typical cup of coffee, if you have this off the top of your head, I'm just catching you off guard potentially, say I can see the price there for a normal, just a flat white coffee, it looks like it's $5. How much of that, loosely speaking, would be, a profit margin for a cafe?
The average profit margin in a cafe is like 10%, according to the ATO, whatever their 2019, 2020 report was. So the actual cup of coffee itself, like say if we sell you a kilo of coffee at $30 a kilo, you might get 40 to 45 cups out of there, depending on how you make the coffee. So you're looking at the cost just for the coffee itself will be like 80 cents. So then you add in milk, you add in the cost of the cup, you add in all that other stuff. So you're making a decent margin, but it's only a $5 unit. So you still need to sell volume of those units. Like it's people always like, there's so much money to be made in a cup of coffee. It's like, but you have to sell hundreds of them a day. You have to sell it to hundreds of different people. So you're making hundreds of sales, which is really hard. And it's really hard to get people who can make good coffee, but also who can interact with customers. Talking to 400, 500 people a day is exhausting. It's really hard work, even when things are going well, let alone when you're in the crazy times we currently have gone through.
We spoke about the difficulty in finding a barista, but I got to admit, even the people that take my order when I go to a cafe, if they remember your name, it's brilliant. Right? It's personal touch. You can tell the people that career hospitality workers, they know what it takes, and they have that kind of, air about them where they do care and they want the business to be a success, because it's not easy. What are some of the ways that people can think about even just planning their business to start off with? So we've already talked about the cost of coffee, how hard it can be. Finding people is important. Finding the right beans for the cafe is important. Like so many
finding
things.
the right location is so crucial. Like and having like a beautiful space, like natural light for me is always like one of the major factors, even though this is a dark little espresso bar.
A bit different.
This is a roastery, but if you can get natural light, location's hard now because who knows what people are doing. The CBD, Melbourne CBD now is more like it's like a suburb rather than the CBD. It's not the same. So when choosing a location, it's perhaps higher risk, which means you don't even need to be smarter, but you need to kind of I always say you need to have the bar low for yourself so you can jump over it every day. So whatever the minimum amount of coffee you need to sell every day, you need to have that as low as possible so you can reach that bar. You don't want to have to think, shit, I need to sell 500 cups of coffee today just to break even, because that's a lot of cups of coffee.
Yeah.
If it's 200 cups of coffee and you can make that by 10 o'clock in the morning, then the rest of the day you're fine. Like we always think in cups or in kilos. That's how we kind of measure things in coffee. Having that, because if you're the business owner and you're in the business, and if you're worrying and stressing about selling enough, that carries through to the customer. The customer doesn't want you to be worried and stressed. They want you to be happy and cheerful and having a great time. And so the owning a business and running a cafe can be a very tough combination. Yeah.
You're obviously at an advantage because you have a roastery attached to your espresso bar, right? So your primary business, if I'm not mistaken, at Rumble Coffee Roasters is the roasting part of that.
Yeah, we're a wholesale coffee roaster.
Yeah. So you've got this here so people can come in, they can try the coffee, customers walk past on the street, and bonus location perk for you is that apartment buildings going up across the road.
Yeah.
So it's just
hundreds of new.
When you bought it 8 years ago, this was the plan. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of people that are just starting out don't have that advantage. So when they're selecting which beans to go with, I feel like that's a fundamental part of the thing that you're selling. So how do you choose?
Well, firstly, you want to find a coffee that you love to drink. So
go and try them.
Try lots of coffees.
Yeah.
And then check out the ethos of the coffee roastery. There's lots of coffee roasters out there. It's a very competitive space. You want to see that they are buying the right coffee and sort of looking after their growing partners in the right fashion. For us, that's very important, that we are treating the growers properly and respectfully, and basically what that comes down to is paying them enough money, because they need to get paid well for what they do, which is the hardest part of the whole coffee making process. And there's so many people who are involved in a cup of coffee before it gets to the end consumer. There's literally dozens of people who are involved in the process, from growing it to picking it to processing it to sorting it to drying it to shipping it to unloading it to roasting it to making it. Like, it's just crazy. So all of those people need to get paid somehow, and ideally get paid well. So when I hear people complain about the cost of coffee, it really it makes me sad, because so many human beings have been involved in getting that to you. It should be something that we are proud of and that we just celebrate, basically. Yeah.
One of the things you said, and one thing that you champion, is increasing the prices of coffee. Whereas, you likened it to a beer. You can go and get a beer at the pub. It's probably going to cost you double what it did 10 years ago, but coffee seems to just
stay the same.
Yeah, stay the same. How does a cafe owner, think about that? A lot of the time they're stressed as it is. How do they then go, okay, I know I need to increase prices. How do I do it?
Yeah, I think you just need to do it.
Ideally, just need to
do it and handle it. When I've done it in the past, and you always have a few customers who complain about it, and you hear about it, and that worries you more than it should, because you hear 2 or 3 complaints, and the way we're built is we think that's more of a problem than it is.
Yeah.
But you get to the end of the week or the end of the month, and you look at how much you've made, and you've made more money. You might have lost 1 or 2 customers, but most of your customers, if you're doing a good thing, will be happy to support you. Like, people are so happy to support small businesses, especially now after the last 2 years. They can appreciate the struggles of small business and what people have gone through. So as long as you're providing them with a great product, they're happy to support you. And it's about having that perceived value of the product. So by working with a great coffee roastery, having great machinery, having great happy staff, all of that sort of thing. If you're competing on price, you're racing to the bottom. And there's always 7-Eleven there selling coffee for $1, and even them, they put their coffee up by 100% just this month. So they've gone up to $2. So if you can't put your coffee up by 50 cents,
yeah, and it's the people that can afford it. Typically, you're not competing against them. I think if you're in reality, you're thinking, okay, this is all coffee, but it's not the same.
No, it's not exactly. And people think everyone who drinks coffee is my potential customer, but that's not. There's people who drink instant coffee, people who drink 7-Eleven, people who only pay $4 for a cup of coffee. They all have their market. For us, we're dealing with high-end specialty coffee, so it's people who want to buy great coffee. And are happy to pay for it. So let's just look after them.
Yeah. I got to admit, I'm a bit of a coffee snob. I do like to spend my $6. Not I don't like to spend it, but I spend it.
$6 well spent.
Back under soy as well, so there's an extra 50 cents typically. You mentioned like people are really important. You started this business with 2 other people, and now there's 2 of you in the business. How did you go about that? How did you go about finding someone to partner with? What were some of the lessons learned from prior businesses?
From prior businesses, I guess I'd learnt that not all business partnerships succeed. Some of them kind of fail along the way. And so you need to be very open and honest about the business at kind of all times, but think about things when you go in and what might happen. So there was 3 of us who set up Rumble, and we talked about at the start, what would happen if someone wanted to leave. We're all from New Zealand, so obviously there's always a draw there back to home. And then during 2020, Stan, one of our business partners, decided to move back home, which is fair enough. It was much better back there than it was here at the time. And so Matt and I, bought him out and all of that. And that was what could have been a really hard thing for the business, ended up being a really good result. He's happy. They've got a great life back in New Zealand and doing really well. And we're running our great business here.
Did you have a provision in place? Like amongst the 3 of you, did you sit down when you started the business and said, if this, then that?
More or less, yeah. We discussed, say, hey, if someone wanted to leave, the other 2 would be able to buy them out and get it valued and kind of assess it that way. And it's just having that conversation at the start, which in previous business situations we kind of hadn't done, talking about you're always thinking about it being a huge success and you making all this money and everything going well, but what if things don't quite go the way you expect? What happens then? And just talking about it so you've thought about it. So it's not such a surprise. It's the shock of bad things which often derails us.
For sure. We got some questions sent in after the first couple of weeks of this podcast going live, and there are a few of them that were along the lines of, there's this other business and they're thinking of merging. They want to merge with our business. And then there was other questions like, how do you value a small business? How did you just you don't have to get into details, but how did you go about valuing the business? Was there like just kind of blanket rule? This is what your share is, my share?
Yeah, well, we got our accountant came in and he kind of valued it, and then we kind of assessed it and talked about it and, had a bit of a conversation and came back, and it was a price that, that we could all deal with. And that was, but it's, you've got to, it's not always fun, but that's kind of the, the grown-up part of doing business sometimes.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And the reason I ask that is that sometimes for certain industries, and accountants will know this, is like certain rules. So an insurance business might be 2 times sales. That's the valuation or something like this. And that helps because then when, it sounds like this is very amicable, but when there was a lot of disagreement, there has to be a line in the sand to say this, and that is yours. And so that, can clear the slate.
Yeah, it happens a lot in cafes. Like if you're buying a failed cafe or a business that isn't going well, and if you ask, say, a cafe's up on the market and you like it, you go and see it, but you see the books and you're like, this thing is not making any money. Like you should be paying me to take this over. But whoever's selling it, it's their baby, and they've invested all this time and all this money, and for them they think it has a value. Whereas looking at it from the outside, you're like, it's not making any money, so it's not worth what you think it's worth. That can be very hard. And so I've had that on a few occasions where, because you think you work so hard on something, so it must have all this.
Yeah, everyone else must think the
what
same.
About goodwill and what about these things? It's like, wow, at the end of the day, it should all be there on the books. And if it's not on the books, then it's not really real. Especially in this industry where for so long it was all lots of cash under the table and lots of kind of, oh, it's doing all this. It's like,
yeah, not anymore. Most of it's coming through your Square
now it's
terminal.
all coming through the Square terminal. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. So another thing is obviously hiring people. And one thing that I think about with cafes in particular, and this is more, I guess, a wholesale thing as well, like the roasting side, is a lot of the good Melbourne roasteries are expanding cafes as well. And one thing I think about, and you'd think about this a lot as a business owner, is the incentive of people that work for you. So if you, for example, you've got the espresso bar here, but let's say you go and open 4 other Rumble stores. You've got the one...
one in Ballarat. Cops Coffee.
Yep. And let's say you keep expanding. How do you think about incentivizing people to work well, you know, to champion the values that you want to make good coffee, to, you know, produce customer service that's respectable?
Yeah, well, I mean, what we would like to do, I guess, and what we've done with Cobbs is we found a business partner who is an old friend of ours who is from Ballarat. We were going to do a plot spot in the city. Our second lockdown hit us. He went back home to Ballarat. He called me up after a month and said, hey, what do you think about doing a spot out here? And I said, well, if you want to stay there and if you want to be there and run it, then let's go. Because we were investing in him, not in the site or so it's all about investing in people. If we have the right people working for us, and we've got great people working for us now, so if one of them wants to do a business and we can find a site with them, then let's go. Because for me, it's all about having those people and giving them the opportunity to run with it themselves, because I can't be running multiple businesses, other sites. I've tried to do that in the past and it's really hard. So you want to have those people and give them some ownership so they can just take it and just go, and you give them the structure and support to run the actual successful business. You know?
I think that whether it's equity or whether it's revenue share, those types of things are kind of like a fail safe. If you're not there, who's actually taking care of things? You know that someone will be.
Exactly.
If you obviously serve you serve customers here in an espresso bar, but you also, your customers are cafes. When you think about some of your more successful cafes, what do they tend to do well that maybe others don't?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. I think they know what they're doing and they do that. It's very easy to open up and offer like all of the things, have a huge menu, lots of different drinks, juices, all the sort of stuff. And then you have to have all the stock. You have to show your staff how to do everything. And then you're kind of doing everything really badly. Whereas you always want to start with like less, do it really well and just focus on that. So our best customers all have a very focused offering. You're always it's always do less. Like you'll always have people coming in saying, hey, you should do, or I should, you know, and it's just whatever thing they're feeling like at the moment. It doesn't mean you should do it. It's your business. You know what you should do, you know. Always listen to your customers. But yeah, I find that as you go on, the more you go on, the better you get at saying no, the better your business will be. Exactly.
Whereas in the early days, you say yes to everything because you want to take the opportunity.
You have to, and you don't know what's going to turn into the thing. It takes you so long to even learn what your business really is. I mean, I wish when we started, we had a better vision of what we were and where we wanted to go, but we didn't know, and you learn by doing. So you just get out there, do it, and then start to say no to stuff when you know what's worth. Yeah. So
before Rumble, you worked in hospitality as a barista. Would you, as you know, you went into roasting rather than starting your own cafe. Would if you were starting a cafe today, what would you say to people to prepare them?
Well, it's probably going to be harder than you think it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that's true for all businesses.
All businesses, especially, I mean, hospitality, it's hard, but it's also, people usually get into it because they love it, which is great, because that love and that passion is what keeps them going through the hard times. I mean, I'm sure accountants are passionate about what they do, but hospitality seems to be a bit different. It's a bit more, people really love, you know, going out and talking to people. Yeah. So that's what gets them through. But then you kind of need to just be smarter about it right away. And right from the start, don't let your passion be the only thing. Think about it like a business, and like build that business structure underneath you so that it's functioning and supporting you. Because you can work so hard and passion can get you so far, but then you just get too tired and burnt out and you don't have a solid business underneath you, and then you kind of fall over. And that for me, that's really hard and really sad when I see businesses fail, people who were, really excited. We had a couple of great customers during who started at like early 2020, mid 2020, a couple of two different customers, young dudes, first businesses, and that first year and a half of like excitement and drive of your first business, they used just kind of surviving, and then they ended up closing their businesses. And, they're still, hopefully they'll do other things in the future. But for me, that was just like really sad because that lost your first business, the first push of it. Like that's something you only kind of get once, and that was just ruined by COVID.
Yeah. In that instance, we spoke a few moments ago. Good on them.
Yeah, exactly. And they learned, so much. And that's what I say to everybody. Just if you want to do a business, just do it. Just go have a crack at it. Yeah.
And I find that entrepreneurialism tends to just repeat through life.
Yeah.
It may not be in a cafe, it may be in something, maybe they go into corporate life and then they try and take something on.
Yeah.
But it tends to just weave its way through your journey. And that's happened with you too, right? So I think that's good on them. Gave it a crack. No one could have seen what was coming.
Exactly.
So how about then, I might just ask just a couple more questions. One is, when it comes to just running the admin of a business, like a cafe, there's go, sometimes 7 days a week, HR, payroll, all this sort of stuff. That's a bit of a headache. Thoughts on getting better at that?
Just use all of the tools you have available, like use things like Deputy, and make sure you use Xero, all of these things that, like, when our first businesses back in the early 2000s, and those tools didn't exist. And so doing the books was really hard. So we did it really badly. So we'd have multiple businesses all kind of mashed together, and the bank accounts weren't very clear, and it was all just like, it was just shitty,
Yeah.
And whereas nowadays, like, it's amazing between Square and Xero and Deputy for your rostering, and everything can be really clear, really simple. And then outsource if you're not good at something, get someone else to do it for you. Like, don't do your books if you're not good at doing your books. Like, just
which most people
aren't. Matt, my business partner, loves doing that stuff. He's got the right brain for it. He enjoys it. He's all over it, and that's great.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do that. Like, that would drive me crazy, and I'd have to spend so many hours doing it badly that I'm better off doing something else and paying someone to.
So you're starting a cafe today, imagine this, and it's just you, right? So you don't have a business partner. Who is the first person that you hire?
Yeah, probably a bookkeeper.
Yeah.
Because I can run the coffee side, I can do all of that sort of stuff, but like, you can't do that and then like pay the bills, and it's just too hard. Yeah, just too hard. And they can do, like, a good bookkeeper can do in like 2 hours a week what would take you like 10, 12 hours, and you'd make mistakes.
Yeah. And if I can put your spot, who would be the second one?
Well, then I'd hire more staff. Where we've always failed in the past is not hiring quickly enough, because we work hard and we're quite good at what we do, so we can do what we do really well. And so you kind of wait till you get like super busy before you hire that next person, because you're always worried about being able to afford them. Do we really need them? All of that sort of thing. Whereas every time we've hired someone, especially in this business, they've just given us increased capacity, and we've been able to do so much more. Hire, but also hire well. You've got to hire the right people, hire people who are better than you at whatever it is you're hiring them for. Like, I couldn't make coffee and serve people anymore. We've got great people who do that for us. I couldn't roast coffee very well anymore. I've got amazing people who do that for us. Yeah,
I like that. And as someone who's clearly like a technician, you've kind of had to move up the ranks and change the way you operate. You've gone from the tools, literally right there. Now you sit in the office and get out and meet people and talk to people in the team. It's a bit of a different skill set, right?
Yeah, I mean, mostly I drink coffee and talk to people. That's kind of what I do all week long, and that's great. I mean, it's lots of fun, but it's also, I mean, I miss roasting a lot, because at the end of the day, when you've roasted coffee, like, you've spent a day roasting, you've turned 100 kilos of green coffee into, you know, X amount of kilos of roasted coffee, and that you've really achieved that. Whereas like what I do now, I can spend like weeks talking to people, potential customers, and you might not get a new customer in that period. So it's a very different, sense of achievement. You know, you get them eventually, but it's a different sort of vibe.
8 years ago, you started Rumble Coffee Roasters. Would you have done it if you had your time again?
Yes, still, but it's definitely been harder than we thought it would be. But we've now got a better business. I mean, we're now where I'd hoped we would be, but over that journey hasn't been a straight, smooth line. There's been a couple of dips and some plateaus. We had one period where we lost quite a few customers, we lost 4 customers over the space of like a month.
In context, how many customers would you have had?
We would have had maybe 15. Yeah, 15.
Wow.
And so they were big customers, and we lost them for different reasons. So we sat back and assessed them, and that was a real turning point for the business, where we realized, you know, you have a period where you just you start off and you just grow, and you think that's going to happen forever.
Yep.
Yeah, and then it doesn't, and you're like, oh shit, what happens now?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we assessed everything, and we realized we needed to do things better and tell the story of what we were doing for our wholesale customers more. We felt this, one of them we lost didn't see all the extra work we did for them with their coffee program. You know, we were running over there at 6:30 in the morning to fix coffee grinders and things like that, that perhaps word of that was not going back to management, because we were doing half of the barista's job for them. Yep. So we kind of changed those systems. And then we also need to have a stronger identity of who we were, and that you don't want to work with every cafe in town. You need to work with the right partners who want to work with you for the right reasons, not because you're cheaper or anything like that, but who really love what you do. So we came out a much stronger business, but yeah, it's no fun at the time.
We can walk in here and we can see the different logos of the coffee on the wall, and can see it all looks beautiful. This has taken 8 years, right? And anyone that's run a small business will know that it's not straight lines, but it looks great. What you've created is credit to you, Matt and Stan. Mm-hmm. It looks awesome, and the coffee's brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah. So rumblecoffeeroasters.com.au.
That's us.
Yep. You can buy online, get a subscription. If you are interested in cafes and the roasting process and how this industry comes alive, please watch the full video in which Joe takes us through the entire business, front to back, and then back out the front. It's a great video and insight into how it all works, mate. Thank you for being the first guest and, hey, first sponsor of the Australian Business Podcast. So, Joe, thanks for taking the time, and thanks for your support.
Thank you. Thanks, Owen. Cheers.